It was an early October morning, the kind where the chill bites just enough to remind you winter's on its way. Alex and his brother Jamie had been planning this hunting trip to Maple Hollow for weeks. Known for its dense fog and thick underbrush, Maple Hollow was a hunter's haven, and the brothers, both seasoned hunters, were eager to bag a few deer. As they set off into the woods, the sun was just peeking through the trees, casting long shadows and making the dew on the leaves sparkle like a blanket of stars. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Alex said, his breath visible in the cool air. Jamie nodded, his eyes scanning the tree line. "Perfect for a day out in the wild, but eerie when the fog sets in. You remember the stories, right?" Alex laughed, a short barking sound that seemed too loud in the quiet of the morning. "Ghost tales to scare kids. We're here for deer, not phantoms." The deeper they walked into the forest, the more the fog began to roll in, thick and enveloping, swallowing the path ahead of them. It wasn't long before they found their favorite spot near an ancient oak tree, its branches gnarled and twisting skyward as if reaching for something unseen. They settled in, rifles ready, the world around them muted and hazy. Time seemed to stretch, thessalence punctuated only by the occasion albird color the rustle of leaves. The usual excitement of the hunt was replaced by a creeping unease, the fog making everything unfamiliar. "That's when it happened," Alex would recall later, his voice just above a whisper. "There was a figure in the fog. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It was just a shadow, right? But then Jamie saw it too. The figure was indistinct, a waver in the air like heat on a road, but there was no mistaking the feeling it brought with it, a cold dread that settled in their bones. It moved towards them, slow and deliberate, its features blurred but its intent horrifyingly clear. "We shouldn't have been there," Jamie said later, his hands trembling as he spoke. "That place wasn't right. The fog. It felt like it was alive, watching us." The brothers didn't wait to find out what the figure wanted. They packed up, their movements hurried and fumbling as the temperature seemed to drop, the fog closing in like a curtain. As they retreated, the figure followed, a constant presence just at the edge of sight, always there but never quite materializing fully. "Every step we took, it mirrored ours, a dance of death in the mist," Alex said, his normally steady voice cracking with the strain of the memory. "It wasn't until we were nearly out of the woods that it stopped following us. But even then, we could feel its eyes on us, cold and empty." Back at their truck, the brothers didn't speak. What was there to say? The drive home was silent, each lost in their own thoughts, their own fears. They'd gone into Maple Hollow looking for deer, but they'd found something else, something unexplainable. "Would I go back?" Jamie mused, staring into the distance. "No. Some things you leave alone. Some places they aren't meant for people. Maple Hollow? It's one of those places. Let them have it." And so, Maple Hollow remains, shrouded in fog and mystery, waiting for the next unwary hunter to ignore the stories and step into its depths. Sarah had always been the adventurous type, the one who would hike the furthest, camp the longest, and hunt the most elusive game. Westridge Woods was her latest challenge, a sprawling forest wrapped in legends of whispers that unnerved even the hardiest locals. Sarah, however, scoffed at such superstitions. "Forests don't whisper," she'd declare with a grin, her eyes twinkling with defiance. "People do." One crisp November evening, she ventured into Westridge alone. The woods were dense, the can oophitic with ancient oaks and whispering pines. Yes, even Sarah had to admit the trees did seem to whisper, but she chalked it up to the wind. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Sarah set up her camp near a small clearing. The air grew colder, and the forest seemed to close in around her. She lit a fire, the crackling flames a small comfort against the growing darkness. That's when she first heard it, a faint whisper, like someone sighing in the distance. "Just the wind," she muttered to herself, focusing on preparing her equipment for the next day's hunt. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Leave. Leave." The words were unmistakable now, not imagined, not the wind. Sarah stood, her heart pounding, and scanned the shadowy forest. Nothing moved, but the sense of being watched was overwhelming. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice strong, but her hands gripping her rifle tightly. No answer came, but the whispers continued, a mourn filching that seemed to echo from every shadow. Sarah's resolve wavered. She was no coward, but neither was she foolish. Packing up her gear, she decided to leave the whispers behind. But as she turned to go, a figure stepped out from between the trees. It was a man, or something that once looked like a man. His features were gaunt, his eyes hollow, as if life had long since left him. He stood silently, watching her, his lips moving slightly as if he were the source of the whispers. "Leave. Now," he said, his voice a mere breath, yet he carried a weight of urgency that chilled Sarah to the bone. Sarah didn't need to be told twice. She backed away slowly, keeping her eyes on the figure until she was sure she was out of his reach. Then she turned and ran, her breath loud in her ears, her feet pounding against the cold earth. She didn't stop until she reached her truck, and even then she half expected to see the figure in her rearview mirror. Later, she would learn from the locals about a hunter who had gone missing in those woods. Decades ago, his whispers still heard by those who dared to wander too close. Sarah never returned to Westridge Woods, her skepticism replaced by a cautious respect for the unknown. "Sometimes," she'd tell her friends, "the bravest thing you can do is listen when the force steals you to leave." Tom prided himself on his grit and expertise in the wild, especially when it came to hunting. Silent Peak, with its formidable terrain and snowy expanse, was his favorite spot. The area was notorious among locals for chilling legends about a mysterious shadow that stalked hunters across the icy fields. While such tales dissuaded many, Tom was not one to be swayed by folklore. He'd always say, "Fear is the only darkness. I hunt in the light of reality." One frosty morning in December, under the faint glow of a waning moon, Tom set out for Silent Peak. His breath vaporized in the icy air, creating misty clouds that blended with the early morning haze. He arrived at his usual hunting ground, a secluded nook near a frozen creek, just as the first rays of dawn streaked the sky. The tranquility was palpable, the silence so profound it seemed almost tangible. As the sun ascended, casting elongated shadows upon the snow, Tom noticed something peculiar, a series of large, irregular footprints that marred the otherwise pristine snowscape. These were not typical animal tracks. They bore a strange resemblance to human footprints, but were much larger and had an unsettling asymmetry. Driven by a mix of curiosity and an unsettling feeling in his gut, Tom followed the tracks. They led deeper into the forest than he usually ventured. The trees here grew densely, their branches heavy with a thick coat of snow, forming a canopy that dimmed the daylight to a twilight gloom. It was here, in the shadow of these ancient sentinels, that Tom felt a coldness creep into his spine. He paused, listening. A soft rustling in the snow broke the silence, suggesting a presence. He spun around to face whatever was approaching. From between the trees emerged a dark figure, indistinct yet unmistakably imposing. It moved towards him with an eerie fluidity, as if gliding over the snow. Tom's usual bravado waned, replaced by a visceral fear. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice echoing off the trees. The figure remained silent, continuing its slow advance. Tom raised his rifle, his hand surprisingly steady given the pounding of his heart. "Stay back," he warned, his voice firm despite the rising fear. The figure halted momentarily when Tom fired a warning shot into the air. The sound ripped through the silence of the forest, a harsh disruption of the natural calm. Then, incredibly, the figure simply vanished, dissipating like smoke on the wind. Shaken, Tom didn't linger to ponder the nature of what he had encountered. He turned and made his way hastily back to the path, glancing over his shoulder frequently, half expecting to see the figure re-emerge from the mist. Upon reaching his truck, he felt a surge of relief. The warmth from the he-adder did little to thaw the chill that had settled deep in his bones. As he drove away, the sun was high, shining brightly on the expanse of snow, showing nosing the dark presence he had faced. Once home, Tom remained disturbed by the encounter. He tried to rationalize it, perhaps a trick of the light and shadow, or maybe his imagination fueled by the local myths. However, the vividness of the encounter left him uneasy. A few days later, while visiting the local diner, Tom overheard a group of hunters discussing the peculiarities of Silent Peak. Reluctantly, he joined the conversation, sharing his experience. An old hunter whose face was etched with line saccage and eyes that hinted at deep knowledge, listened intently. When Tom finished, the old hunter spoke softly, his voice carrying a weight of unseen burdens. "You saw the shadow," he said slowly. "Many of us have felt its presence, but few have seen it, and fewer still have returned to speak of it. Consider yourself fortunate." Tom's skepticism waned as he listened to the old hunter recount tales of those who had vanished in the woods, their last known steps marked by the same strange, large footprints Tom had tracked. These stories were not documented in any official records, but lived in the whispered warnings of those familiar with the Silent Peak's hidden depths. The tales spoke of an ancient spirit of the forest, a guardian of the wilderness, manifesting as a shadow to those who trespassed with disrega ard forth the sanctity of then natural world. It was said that the spirit marked the boundary between the known world and the old magics that modern civilization had forgotten. Months passed, and Tom never returned to Silent Peak. He continued to hunt, but his outings were now tinged with a respect for the unknown, a humility for the mysteries of nature he had once dismissed. The experience had changed him, infusing his outdoor ventures with a sense of reverence and caution. In his later years, Tom would often recount story by the fireside to young hunter Seeger for tales of adventure. He spoke not just of the skills needed for hunting, but also the wisdom to recognize the limits of human dominion. "The true hunter knows when to aim and when to heed the whispers of the world," he would say, his eyes reflecting the flickering flames that cast shadows reminiscent of that fateful morning. And so, the legend of the shadow in the snow of Silent Peak grew, a tale of mystery and a reminder of the wild's enduring enigma, whispered in the hush of falling snow and the rustle of ancient pines. If you want to see more horror stories, check out my next video.